Oh, I think I got it.
Excellent.
Oh, nice.
Excellent. I feel better now.
All right.
I'm a little concerned that my third square is all black, but there we go. Now we have
So if I full screen this Bad Mama Jamma, what happens? Then do we see everyone? Yeah, this
you
can work.
fixed it.
Yay!
This can work. Okay, how do I? Okay, all right. Breathe, Noah. Just breathe.
Everything will be fine, Noah. There's definitely not some kind of slasher murderer coming out from the corner to come and like knife you.
I hope not.
I mean, come on, the scenery looks just like something like that's gonna happen to him.
Yeah. Classic horror film.
Okay, all right. So let's
content creation.
Okay, here's the next thing. Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
mute my. Do you guys hear good audio from me? You guys hear that?
I do not hear good audio from you now.
Hold on.
Now this is the first time I get to see like the whole like Noah studio area.
Oh yeah, it's a nerd lab out of 10. Let me tell you. So let's see. How does I get to my audio configuration in here? How do I?
Diego just said content creation in Fedora at its peak.
Are we streaming? We're live now, aren't we?
You know what the issue is? I'm happy to own this. We're trying to do this in a way that is replicatable by anybody. So all of this is designed to be.
It's all experiments.
Yeah, right? and it's designed to be something you can just buy off the shelf and plug in. So
which is admirable.
Diego said he could hear you loud and clear, but
test
that we are low. Me and Neil are low.
I will fix that.
Is my volume coming in okay?
Are you guys getting?
I can hear you well. Yeah.
Are you guys
always turn you up on the OBS side?
Are you?
I mean, because I hear Noah and you.
Can you hear me?
For me.
Can you guys hear me?
Well, you guys I don't hear Noah at all.
No, you don't hear.
Okay. I think I remember, Noah, that you had like one camera where we could see you and hear you, and then you had the main microphone going out into the other or into the actual stream itself. Last time we did this. Good times.
Whatever. This is the magic of content creation.
Yeah.
And this is the content. It's okay.
Okay. No. But then.
Whoa.
Ooh, yeah.
I can hear myself. That's bad.
Yeah. Here's what we do, though.
So, folks on the internet, this is how the sauce is made. The open
Noah
sauce.
sounds fine when speaking to that mic. Neil and Noah are still low.
That is absolutely mixer control on the other end. Yeah. Because there's no way that I am quiet in any reasonable sense of the word. I ain't there. Yep, there you go. I'm the antonym. Yeah.
And then Noah's going to be buttery, and they're going to be buttery.
How did we manage to get a show that has a Neil, a Noah, and a Noel on it?
This is the plan.
That is the ultimate tongue twister, as Diego had said in the chat.
Oh man, I'm missing out on so much by not being in the chat. Let's see if it doesn't cause problems for me.
Okay, Diego is saying better for whatever we did on the mixing side. So
okay, I'm okay. Weird GNOME windows. I don't know how I feel about this, but it's okay, I guess.
Whoop. Now you are a blank screen, though. No, you're black. Like something covered the camera. There we go. There we are.
Oh, perfect. Entertainment. Oh, microphone. That was pretty much what I was doing while I was waiting for someone to show up in here.
Farcourt in the chat was saying if someone knows how to Scandinavian dance, he'd appreciate that.
Oh, no.
I told him the best I can do is the Irish jig, and that's about it.
Oh, not even the Russian one? That one's supposed to be easy.
I've never heard of a Russian jig before.
Well, it's the one that people do with where they stand still and they dance with their feet, an in place movement thing. Because dancing wasn't allowed in Orthodox Christianity or something like that. I forget what exactly that was about. So, like, they invented a whole.
Here's the thing: this is the sacrifice we make for you. We make the sacrifice for you so that you can open source with us. One sec, I get my keyboard.
Yep.
And everyone is named Noel, by the way, for the name tag. So I don't know if there's a way we can.
Oh, that's probably not right.
I mean, I guess technically my name is under me, which is good.
Yes, but I think that's a happy accident.
Oh,
whoa!
We got camera switching. Oh, cool.
We got keyboard.
We got keyboard. We got camera switching. We got enough cables in here to start a BDSM convention. We're good.
Whoa! Wow! We are pre-show.
Oh, sorry. Was that out loud? I hate it when I do that. Dang it, Noah.
It's okay.
All right. It's good. It's all good. We're here. We're good.
You know,
we're good.
I think I'm okay with my massive name under me. We'll figure out guess things later, I suppose.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm seeing that now.
I'm just the unnamed guest. It doesn't matter.
What if we did that? Well, that looks terrible, Noah. You're only in half the frame. What the heck?
Whoa.
Oh.
I didn't know that Noah had a camera that didn't make him look like he was being, like, made of...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, he's got the really nice camera. We just have to figure out...
Hey there. I fixed Eric's problem. I talked to him this week. He's coming back. He's gonna... Okay, all right. We're good. And we've been recording this whole time, so this clown show is permanent.
We've got double Noah, but you know what? It's pretty cool. It's fine.
It's different angles. It's so you can see my good side and my bad side.
There is a way, I think,
you don't
to
have a bad side,
kill
Noah.
the feed. Yeah, there's a way to kill the feed, but we're already running a little over. So you know what? Let's just get this show on the road, shall we?
Okay. Hashtag don't do that.
And if you don't know why I said that, then I feel sad for you.
Do we need music to start us off?
Yeah, let's do a little music intro here. Well, this is the end of the pre-show, everybody, or what some might call the clown show. I don't know, but it's going great.
It's a show. It's something like a show.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we click this button here, and we click that button there, and we grab this here, and then we grab music, and let's do music. Let's do this. Number. Scroll here, and grab this. Okay. Ready? Set. Here we go.
I figure we can't hear the music, but that's okay. We don't.
It's probably fine. I'm sure the music is...
Welcome into the Fedora Podcast. My name's Noah Chalaya. Joining me, Neil. Welcome in, gentlemen.
How's it going, Noah?
I'm doing well. There's a little bit of a hop, skip, and a run But it's okay. We just roll with the punches. That's how we do it on the Fedora Podcast.
That's all we can really do. Yeah.
So joining us as a guest, Neil Gompa. If you're at all involved in the technical community, you've likely seen him. And if you've not seen him, you've probably had a problem that he fixed. You just didn't know he was the nerd that fixed it for you across the internet. So you can start by just saying, thanks, Neil. That's what I do when I see him.
Thank you, Neil.
This is very weird. Hi.
Welcome in.
You're welcome, I think?
Yeah, that's right. You're the nerd on the internet that fixes stuff. I've yet to see you be asked a question, Neil, where you're not like, well, I have some insight to that. You might not know everything, but you at least know where to start, or you can point a dude in the right direction.
Okay.
He's not good with compliments. It's okay. That's why we have him here.
Well, yeah, and I think we've got a great topic today. It's one that we talked about in some of the previous podcasts where, as y'all know or are aware, we've recently changed some stuff. So we're still kind of trying to work through the speed bumps and such or troubles. So yeah, I will go ahead and get us started here. So we've got some topics we want to talk about today in regards to content creation on Fedora. And the first question that I have for everybody is, what does content creation mean to you in the space of doing computer stuff?
So I guess maybe I'll start here. So I would say that there's a couple things. When you start looking at content creation, I feel like there's a couple different ways to approach it. These days, everybody is a content creator if you have a smartphone and a camera, right? And so that leads to, I'll call it, a variety of quality that makes its way to the internet. I think what is interesting about forward-looking distributions like Fedora is they leverage the latest and greatest technology available so that if you're interested in doing professional production, those tools become available to you. Things like Pipewire. Neil, is that an accurate take? Is that a
Oh yeah, sure, right? Like one of the big advantages I think of Fedora from a content creator's point of view, is that as the new technologies get developed that help you be more effective in those, you get to take advantage of them basically right away. Fedora being on the cutting edge of this stuff means that you have those technologies coming in and being plugged in, and because Fedora is a community of people that actually get stuff done and put stuff together, they often get integrated together, things get qualified and assembled in such a way that you can take advantage of it pretty much right away, right? Like, yes, it basically, we have this level of integration and curation that allows workflows to be very easily built with new technology very quickly. And so Pipewire is a great example of this. When we rolled it out with Fedora 34 back in 2021, we were the first distribution to do it. I was one of the folks that helped actually plug it all in, and we basically swapped out the Pulse Audio service and Jack and all this other stuff and slotted in all of the integration points so that all the applications and services that previously used Pulse Audio or ALSA or Jack or any of these other things just all straight went into Pipewire. And with that and the Wire Plumber stuff that happened the following Fedora release, we now have a model in which if you want to be very basic about it, you can just, click and activate and use them in your OBS Studio. But if you want to have fancy workflows where you have scripted manipulation of the audio and video pipelines, because Pipewire is not just audio, it can also handle video, camera feeds and stuff like that. You can do all that manipulation through scripting, either through Lua or Python or writing custom programs or any of this other stuff, in addition to all the normal stuff you can do through simple access through like OBS Studio or any of these other tools that you're familiar with for recording and casting and creating presentations and that sort of thing.
So here's a concept. Noel, you did a thing where you built essentially an appliance based off of Fedora. Now, you were doing it for gaming. If you were going to do something similar to that for media production, would you consider Fedora?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the big benefits that Fedora has is that a lot of these things are available out of the box. Recently, I actually worked with Neil and with Carl and submitted my first package for an RPM, which is specifically for an OBS plugin that I needed. There unfortunately was an issue upstream that will be fixed in one of the future versions for Flatpak, but at the moment, the only way that you can fix it is by actually carrying this patch. And so for me personally, like, there's a lot of benefits with being able to build an appliance like type of, I mean, there's Ubuntu Studio, which the whole goal of that distribution is to be an appliance like system. So I could definitely see a huge benefit in creating, you know, a video production or, you know, any type of appliance for doing content creation. And I think that's one of the big things that would be really helpful, that I actually would probably want to potentially might start moving towards, just because then we can have a stable thing that we always can rely on.
Here would be my encouragement, and Neil, I'd be particularly interested to get your thoughts on this. I've always thought, all respect to Eric Eichmeyer, I've always thought Ubuntu Studio would be better as some sort of a package, some sort of an add-on. I have my distribution installed. Now I want to use it for production. How do I do that? Well, it'd be great if there was a PPA or there was a thing I could add and it just transformed my existing box with the software I want, the configuration I want, and added all of the production-y like things. Is Fedora primed to do something like that, where you could have a stock Fedora instance and you want some tweaks, but instead of an entirely new respin or an entirely new distro, just takes the base distro and adds some tooling to it?
Well, you know, it's funny you should say that, right? So at this point in time, I would probably say that if you're using KDE Plasma, and to a lesser extent GNOME, so Fedora KDE Plasma Desktop Edition or Fedora Workstation Edition, you're probably already there. If you just install whatever creation tool you want to use, the workflows will all slot in and everything will just work, because the underlying components that are needed for that and the configuration is all done automatically now for these variants, right? So when we moved to Pipewire, we took the opportunity to clean up a bunch of things and apply some of the more reasonable things that you would use on a content creator or studio-like environment, and just made them default in Fedora. So they already are there. Some of the things that used to be required in old studio distribution setups, like making it low latency or setting it to real-time scheduling or whatever, those aren't really required anymore, unless you're in like super high throughput, high bandwidth situations, like you're doing a giant concert hall and you're doing a big music video and you have to like stream it like 8K. And at that point, every packet matters, and then you're just like toast if you don't do that. But your average web streamer case, or your Twitch streamer, game streaming, all those things, none of that's really required. I mean, if you look at what Noel's done with Bazzite, like, he's just basically slipped in a couple of extra add-ons into his case. He didn't do any special configuration for that. He just added the packages and he was done. So I think from the point of view of, like, if you look at Fedora and you want to do content creation, well, if you've got Fedora KDE Plasma Desktop Edition, then just install OBS Studio and a couple other things and you're good to go, because whatever tools you use for doing content creation makes sense. Like for me, I have OBS Studio for streaming because I'm a Twitch streamer from time to time whenever I can find time to do it, and which hasn't been a lot lately, but I'm hoping I'll be able to do more of it soon. Also, I use Kdenlive for if I'm doing recorded stuff, I'll do editing with Kdenlive. And like if I'm doing, I mean, this is an oldie but a goodie, but if I'm doing just audio only editing, I'll just use Audacity. Like I like using Audacity for that stuff. Because like the zoom controls for the waveform makes it very easy to be precise about cuts and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I hate to interrupt, but like, yeah, I have to echo I completely underestimated Audacity. Most of my audio editing has really been in like DAWs, like Reaper or Ardour. I tried, Ardour is a little bit too heavy of a tool for something like this, like when you're just editing like something small like that, or like any, like when I previously was doing content creation on a Mac, you would use, Logic or something like that. And I very much underestimated the capabilities of Audacity because I've been using it pretty regularly now for actually editing the episodes, like just making like quick cuts and that sort of thing. And I'm like, wow, this has really come a long way since I used it like, 10, 15 years ago. Like,
where are we?
Well, I originally learned on Sony Vegas like 20 years ago. So, right? Yeah, Sony Vegas.
And it was so good, even though it was proprietary. It was good.
It was, and also Sony discontinued it, which made me very mad.
But do you notice the Caden Live folks among us will appreciate the fact that today's Caden Live borrows from the Sony Vegas, where you drag the.
Why do you think I love it?
You drag the corner. This is brilliant. It really was. And did you Adobe what is it? Not Premiere. Thank you. You Final Cut people, you can go pound sand. This is the best way to go. It's got the little corners, 100%. And you drag in, and it does a crossfade or a fade out. So it was just intuitive. It was. You could use a monkey could use it. Anyway, sorry. Where are we all at with the Audacity versus I'll just come out and say it. The Muse licensing. Telemetrics, where are we at? Care? We don't care? We're good with it?
So,
not good with it?
I think it's turned into a much ado about nothing kind of situation for the most part, right? Because distribution builds of all of these tools don't include any of that stuff. But this is one of those points where I often come back and say, hey, this is why distribution packages exist. This is why we as distributors exist as a counterweight to upstream software decisions. Because if something is going wrong, we can examine and correct these things. In this case, we don't actually have to do much. We just don't have a license key for any of that stuff. So we just don't, and we turn it off. And that's kind of how we roll for MuseScore, Muse, Audacity, everything that's, I forget, there's like 4 or 5 of those things that company makes now. But like all those applications, when they're packaged in Fedora, we just don't have that. And that's okay. And so like, I don't worry about it. If you're using something that's officially produced by them, then that's a different story. If you're a Mac or a Windows user, then this is probably a different story, but you also probably don't care because you're already dealing with this with everything else anyway. So, I think as a Fedora user, because we have these applications shipped in Fedora, they're kept relatively up to date. They're well integrated, and we don't have those things turned on in our builds. I just don't worry about it.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm trying to remember the last time I used MuseScore. It's been a while. Like, I think it was when I was learning piano that I wanted to like do sheet music and that sort of thing. And like, yeah, I've just been so busy. I haven't really had a chance to actually practice piano or practice reading music. But yeah, like, I think for me personally, it's like, yeah, like look, we're able to fix it.
If you don't mind, I want to dig into that a little bit. So when you say practice/sheet music, are you talking about you want composition software on Linux, or more along the lines of you want some way to display music as you play it?
So for me, I mean, yeah, it was mostly the displaying aspect of it. Like, I'm still very, very new to learning how to actually compose with sheet music. I have always composed any song or written anything using like tablature or just by ear, just because for me, I just never had the primary music education that a lot of folks did, where like they went through like band, and stuff like that. Like they learned how to play, like trumpet or trombone or something. For me, I have always just played guitar, played drums or whatever, pretty much just by ear or by tablature, just because it's mentally for me a lot easier to read. So yeah, I mean, for me personally, that's what it's for. But I know a lot of folks who love using MuseScore to actually do composition, and it works pretty well, like in comparison to other commercial options available.
So I used to do scoring, so as in writing musical scores through composition, as in with the notes and the scale and all that stuff. When I was very young, I learned the piano, and I learned the score and all that stuff. I dropped it, then came back to learning how to do music through score in high school and college. And now that skill has kind of rotted away from my brain again because I don't use it that much. But I like MuseScore for being able to do it both ways. Sometimes it's super nice to be able to like So I like to torture myself a little bit by just changing the scores and then do the levels and like whether it's going to be a treble or bass or was it going to be in quarter or eighths and whatever, and then just put the notes in and see what happens. And that's very easy to do when you're scoring. And when you're doing it by tablature or by ear, it's naturally going to pick a fixed scale and scoring method and whatever. So you can go both ways, and I find it to be fun when I want to torture people with music, with music compositions by doing that. But in all seriousness, right? Like it's useful because for the most part, I know things by ear, but I do actually still kind of know how to read score, and so it's useful for me to be able to practice both if I ever have a flight of fancy in doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like that's a really cool thing for me is just thinking about how content creation has changed from when I started using Linux to now what is available and what the capabilities are. I mean, to think about the fact that like something like live streaming, which in my opinion is still fairly new, even though people have been doing it for, 10 plus years at this point. I mean, like, I think what's crazy is to see how OBS has absolutely just become the de facto standard
everywhere,
regardless of what platform you're using. Like, it has just become such a capable piece of software, and people have been able to edit it and make changes to it. And I have to applaud just how amazing of a thing that has become. People are using it for even like larger things than just doing Twitch streaming. Like, I've seen folks that have been doing like productions with it and that sort of thing. And it's just really one of those things. And I think like something that I think about a lot is like, what does Linux need to do, or what do we need to do on the Fedora side in order to be able to have tools like OBS, become like the new de facto standard? Because I know like GIMP recently had some changes that made that software a lot more easy to use, a lot of updates from behind the scenes as well. And then there's also tools like Inkscape and Krita as well from like a visual artist perspective. Like, what is really holding us back from like, because people are like, oh, I'll use GIMP, but I can't use it for my professional work because my shop uses Photoshop, like what can we do to improve that?
So there's a couple of things we can really do here, right? So the first one is you look at what tools are available for us, and you look at the capabilities that the industry requires, and you figure out what the mapping is. So when you look at, for example, I like to pick at video production because people are fickle about their video production workflows. To be fair, so am I, which is why I went from Vegas to Caden Live. But like, when you look at video production workflows, it's often about how do you handle inputs, how do you transform them, basically pipelining them with effects and modifications and edits and whatever. And how do you interchange them with another person in a bigger world? I won't say not in the real world, because the real world can have small groups and big ones, but in big groups, particularly in large professional spaces like studios, film, VFX, which is a scene that I'm very intimately familiar with. You often have a group of people handling one subsection of this and then storing it in an interchange and transferring it to another group of people who work with another tool to do another aspect of it. They store it in the same interchange and turn it to a third group of people who use a different tool. So the real important aspect is there's got to be this baseline standard of data interchange that multiple tools of different workflows and types and aspects can operate on. And this is something that, like, for example, the Academy Software Foundation, something like the VFX, VFX folks under the Linux Foundation, they have been, a lot of the CGI studios have been bringing their tooling, their workflows, their ideas, and putting them into a melting pot and coming up with, standards of interchange, standards of workflow, standards of color manipulation, standards of timeline management, standards for templating, grains, all this other stuff that you have to do as part of video production.
Mm-hmm.
And also this also equally applies to audio production. There's a corresponding group that does some of the same stuff for audio stuff as well. Although audio is a much more solved problem these days than video is, because many years ago, people just decided we're going to just do lossless stuff. And all the transformations are going to be stored as like XML metadata on top of lossless clips. And that's pretty much how all the tools are able to interoperate. For video, things are more complicated because video is so big that you cannot store it lossless. You have to store it in some kind of codec format. And one of the challenges is that for a lot of these tools that people are used to, the various tools will store them in their own codec and interchange formats.
Yeah.
And so this is the hard part. But there's a slow movement to move everyone towards open standards with, broadly available integration points so that this stuff can move around. And so that's video, and then there's audio. And then now we got to talk about still media, like pictures, right? Now, still media has another set of challenges that is unique to it, in that it is also used for physical media. Like we're talking about papers, posters, print, basically. Like print is actually the biggest challenge in the still media world, because you have things like Pantone that you have to work with. You have a different color index. You're using CMYK instead of RGB. You have to handle that mapping. You need white point calibration for your displays, because you need to make sure that your color indexes are correct. I mean, this is also applicable to digital production, but it's even more important with physical production. And so all this stuff, the open source tools have been fairly good at digital production. It's actually the physical stuff that's hard. GIMP went through 20 years of slow rewriting to gain proper support for CMYK, non-destructive editing, all this other stuff, and in order to become a proper editor in this sense. Now, Krita, which actually started out as essentially a KDE version of GIMP in its first place, mostly has all these facilities today. So Krita is a great tool for this kind of stuff, but it's also been tilted a lot more towards art, paint, that sort of thing. So it has other specialty functions that are great for that. That's not to say it can't be used for photography. I have used it for photography, but there are other tools that are better for that. So you, for example, have Raw Therapy, Darktable. Like those are better for dealing with photography. And you have GIMP that's pretty good for the digital, like thumbnails and stuff like that. And then you have Krita that's great for a cross section of these two cases, plus the idea of being able to do like drawings and editing, stuff like that. I bought myself a digital tablet like a couple years ago, because like one of the things I like to futz around with is just drawing stuff, and being able to use it with Krita, it has, lets me explore that in a way where I don't like have a pile of paper floating around everywhere. And yeah, so like we're there in many respects. We're not there in terms of recognition. And ultimately, the big piece is we're missing this universal interchange that you need for people to move across the formats. People bring up the Photoshop format. Fun fact, the Photoshop format is documented. So PSD has been a documented format for quite a while. There's also DXG, which is the film counterpart, the 3D model counterpart of this. So Blender, for example, is mostly becoming an industry standard now. It wasn't always. There was Maya and a few others that people used more, but Blender has started to win over in that place. And because of this usage of this open interchange for 3D models, it's been easier for Blender to come into those spaces. So really, it's open formats, open support, and being able to blend workflows across multiple tools for multiple teams. That's how you get open source winning in content creation. And we're getting there. We're very slowly inching forward on that.
I think that's a really good point, actually, is that I haven't really ever thought about. Is I've mostly thought about it from the perspective of folks are used to a specific type of workflow and a specific type of tool that has specific features that they need in order to be able to complete their job. And like you were saying with your Sony Vegas to Kdenlive sort of transition, it was like you were used to just doing things a specific way. And I think that there is some level of I've been doing things a certain way for so long long. I don't want to have to learn a new way of doing things. But I think at a certain point, it really is more of a functional sort of issue where it's like, if I literally cannot use this tool to have like CMYK support, for example, for doing print, or I have to have really accurate color. And I've learned more and more about print media over time after like investigating creative stuff and content creation, is the fact that it's like, yeah, like the way that you print things, like, and how you look at it on a digital display, like the reason why you need to have those color, panels and formats and that sort of thing is that it's going to show up in a different way on print. And you want to make sure that it actually shows up the way that you expect in a print format versus in a digital format. So I think that's a really big deal too. And Noah, you got something?
Well, the thing that I've noticed over the time, like when I started doing production on Linux, it would have been 2010. It would have been 2010, and that date sticks out for me for a very specific reason. But what I noticed early on was you were using proprietary tools on Linux, and so for me that was Lightworks, but there were many others. Since that time, the open source ones have gotten much better. More proprietary ones have come onto the scene, so that has done nothing but help us. But here's the important shift I've noticed in the industry. The first is, I would say we're already there today where OBS is a standard. And I think we kind of touched on this, but it was strange. We talked on it both sides. We said we kind of wish it would become like the industry standard. And I think earlier we kind of concluded it was. And I would agree with that. I think it has stomped most of the competition out. But the thing that I've watched Linux what happens with open source is it seems like it goes like this. Proprietary gets there first, and they dial everything in, and it's super tight, and it integrates well, and it does all the things, and it's super great, but it's very expensive, and it's niche. You only have it if you're part of a select group. And open source sets its foot onto the scene, and when it initially does so, there's a pushback of, well, that's not a serious product. That's like the imitator, the little plaything that you use if you can't afford the real one, right? It starts like that. But very quickly, what we find is the speed and the quality of the open source project tends to fly far faster and far further than the proprietary solution. And my case in point there is Resi, R-E-S-I. Resi is a company that builds I'm using my air finger quotes here, a hardware encoder for doing video stream. I was on a support call with Resi. They asked me to plug an HDMI cord into the Resi hardware appliance encoder and plug a keyboard in. You know what I found myself sitting at? A GNOME desktop with CentOS. And so the big guys, my point there is all of the big guys, all of the proprietary players, you know what they're using under the hood? They're using Linux. And now we've gotten to a point where you can buy a Blackmagic SDI, a Decklink Duo for like $500 or $600. You get 16 channels of digital audio. You get 4 channels of uncompressed, no, a copyright, this, that, or the other, onto the PCI bus directly into a computer. That's exposed directly into OBS. If you add the add-on for OBS, you get NDI, which means now you can go buy $300 or $400 NDI cameras, and you can put them in, and you can take as many video sources as you want. And those video sources can be local. They can be remote. I was working on a broadcast in which it was a sports arena, and they mounted NDI cameras and sent those NDI feeds back to a studio, and 300 miles away, there's a studio doing switching of low latency, high definition, uncompressed video feeds over the frigging internet. Like, you tried to do that 10 years ago and you would have been laughed at. I mean, they brought this entire satellite trucks and fiber trucks and all the things. And now that's running over the open internet, and it's common. There are entire companies whose business models build around installing little NDI cameras and pulling those feeds back. All of that, 100% of that, is powered by Linux and available to us in the open source world.
Yeah, I mean, even 5 years ago, it wasn't possible. Like, really, this is where I'm going to pull at a thread from another space that I used to be involved in, is telecommunications. Yeah. 5G's made a big change in the accessibility of this technology, because it used to be you had to bring up satellite trucks, you had to buy dedicated feeds of bandwidth, you had to get licenses from the FCC, you had to get blackouts for spectrum ranges and all this stuff. Now you can operate over commercial 5th generation wireless. You can purchase access, reserved access on a telecommunications provider that offers a 5G network, like say T-Mobile US here in the USA, and then you have guaranteed bandwidth. And I think, like, for example, I think the baseball, MLB.
Hmm.
MLB this whole past year was done that way. Like
Really?
that whole last season was all of that was, the production was done that way. It was streamed that way. It was all, and that's why that's part of the T-Mobile MLB partnership thing. And again, underneath all of that is all this stuff I was talking about, these open source interchanges, these pipelining tools, this stuff, because without all of that stuff, that is not economical.
Right.
You can't do it.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that is a really interesting observation you've made, Noah, about just how like technology seems to move forward. Is that, like I said, there's a ton of money that's thrown at a problem, then it's a proprietary solution that only few have access to. Then everybody's like, oh, that's possible. Okay, we're going to build our own thing and do it, in a much more economically feasible way where more folks can actually work on this problem and utilize this solution for the problem. And I think that's kind of how content creation has changed over the years. Like, I'm thinking about it just in the 3D modeling space, how popular Blender has started to become, where it's like that used to not, like, I've talked to folks that work in the space of doing like 3D and stuff like that. And yeah, Blender is becoming more and more like the de facto standard of where people are going to now. I mean, obviously there's still stuff out there like SolidWorks and other things for like specific types of workloads. But like, again, those things are actually, funny enough, becoming more and more niche, and people are like, oh, I'm learning how to do things on Blender. And I think that's like the biggest thing too, that Microsoft and a lot of the proprietary companies have become very smart about, is if you catch people with tooling when they're young and they learn how to do things in a specific way, then you ultimately have folks that are invested in that sort of technology. So the more and more that we can say, hey, you can do most 99% of everything that it is that you want to do in open source tooling, like that has become less and less of an issue over time, I would hope.
Here's the other thing I would add to that. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you have 32 features, we'll be a nerd, 32 features that are available in proprietary software. And let's just say there are 16 features in the open source alternative. And so proprietary person says, but so-and-so, it's 32 features. Isn't there 16 more features that you get over here? Okay, that's fantastic. Here's where that falls apart rather quickly. It falls apart rather quickly insofar as when you have a problem with the software that has the 32 features, maybe all 32 of those features worked splendidly for 4 years, and all of a sudden it falls apart. You open a support ticket or a request or whatever it is. First of all, that presumes that you have support, which not all commercial software does. Sometimes that's extra on top, more expensive, whatever. 100% of the time, 100% of the time, when I've had a problem with an open source project, I've been able to track a nerd down on the internet that's able to help me. Oftentimes, not always, but often, it's the nerd that originally wrote that piece of software. But if not, and I would say that's a rarity, but it does happen, there's somebody else that says, oh, I've also had that problem. Here's how you fix it. And so there is a level of community support all the way up to the head of the snake that's available to you with open source software that just fundamentally doesn't exist with proprietary software. And maybe 10 years ago, we didn't take that as seriously, or we didn't care about it, or we didn't focus on it, or we didn't draw attention to it, or whatever. Today, I would tell you it's a big deal when you can bump into Glorious Eggroll and say, hey, man, I really like the fact that I can play on my Windows games on Linux. That's amazing. Thanks for doing that. And he, in his very Glorious Eggroll, nonchalant kind of way, yeah, love doing it. Just say hi in Discord. You know what I mean? Like, it's your friend on the other side of the internet that's willing to help you.
Well, so there's also another aspect of this, right? So you bring up the fact that this proprietary software has 32 features, more than the 16 that in the open source one.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you can't use any combinations of those features together. And a big difference between the open source and the proprietary worlds is the friction in getting new combinations of features to work. It is much higher in a closed solution than it is in an open one. And again, and let's not discount the fact that when you have open source solutions, you also have democratized the ability to extend it and expand on it and build upon it. So like, hey, maybe the vendor, if there is a vendor, there sometimes isn't a vendor. Maybe it's just a dude on the internet or a gal on the internet or some person on the internet, right? When it's some person on the internet and that person just doesn't have the bandwidth to deal with it, and they don't have a way for you to incentivize them to deal with it, you can find someone else who could be skilled in this, who could be made to be incentivized to develop the thing you need to make it work. I mean, this is fundamentally how OBS Studio wound up taking over the world, right? Like OBS Studio, when it first came out, the Open Broadcaster software, way back in the day when it was originally Windows only and then got rewritten to be cross-platform, didn't do a lot. But what it did do was offer a plugin system.
Yes.
And that plugin system allowed people to create their own workflows. And that was the killer feature because all of its contemporaries didn't have this capability. And this capability also extended to automating transmissions to different streaming systems. OBS Studio, in its source code, contains the most complete registry of streaming targets that I've ever seen in my life.
Didn't even know that many existed.
Right? And there are so many different combinations, so many different ways. And if you know what you're doing, you can do some truly crazy things inside of there. And that's sort of that's the real superpower with open source content creation. And like when you take that all the way from the application down to the operating system, you can build opinionated workflows in a box. And then you could choose to commercialize it. You could choose to share it. You could choose to reuse it. You could choose to scale it. You could choose to whatever you want, right? Like, let's say Noah and I tomorrow decide we're going to make the content creator superhero box or whatever we want to call this. We build it on Fedora KDE. We put together an opinionated set of tools. We have the set of accessories, and we come together and we have this product that we now sell. And then someone comes to us and says, "Hey, this does all the things for like my YouTube and Twitch, but now I want to do webinars on pro system stuff, and I need fancy multiplexing, and I need transcriptions, and I need hooks for all this stuff." Well, they can choose to pay for that feature to be developed, and either we would develop it in-house with the two of us, or we would find someone who is skilled in this, who would come in and work with us to build the feature. And then we can release it to the, as part of the product to the community. And then it basically builds on itself. You start seeing more and more of this. This is the success story for OBS Studio. This is the success story for Blender. This is the success story for Linux as a whole, right? The reason why Linux has succeeded in so many avenues is because of this quintessential property to be able to do this sort of thing. When you can't do this, when you are restricted by the software, by someone else's opinions, it fundamentally has an end of life date. And when you are fundamentally restricted that way, at the end, there's going to be a point where you say, "I'm done." And like people are saying this in many industries about Adobe. I mean, oh my gosh, if you go look on the Reddit and other places about it, nobody has nice things to say about Adobe these days.
No, absolutely not.
And it goes with all the others. Like if you look at vMix and Streamlabs and like a bunch of these others, or even Dassault Systems, 3DS, many of the, like, as you look out and you go further out in all these places, people are fundamentally mad because they are not treated as stakeholders. They are not treated as users that matter. And in the open source world, it is rare for this to be the case where the users and stakeholders are not treated as part of the process. That's not to say it doesn't happen. I can definitely come up with cases where that does, but it is rare for that to be the case. And that is ultimately why over the long term, open source tends to win out, even in the most difficult of use cases like the Linux desktop and content creators and gaming and video production and all this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing that's really fascinating to me is that I remember when I first started listening to Noah on Jupiter Broadcasting, you know, you guys were talking about how like you had to have these proprietary solutions, you know, basically like you had to use a Mac because of this specific issue, which you always barked back and said, no, we don't have to do any of this on, you know, on any of the
Here's the thing, there's
platforms and stuff.
Here,
but like, yeah,
there's always a choice. Yeah, we'll just leave it there. There's always a choice, and so you're going to fight your tools. It's just a matter of what tools you want to learn where the bones are buried. You pick those tools and you dig in, and then once you get comfortable, it's like a you know, good pair of pants that you know they fit you right. Yep. You conform to them, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's what's fascinating is now we are literally talking today, like all of us on a Linux system and a very professional broadcast, though, you know, we're still figuring things out, but like but I think like once we get everything dialed in, like what I'm really hopeful to do is basically being able to document how from start to finish, how we create a Fedora podcast episode, a live one and a pre-recorded one. And essentially here's all the open source tooling that we use. Here's how we edit things. And so that like in the future, if folks want to create their own podcast utilizing Fedora, then all of that path is going to be paved for you, hopefully. And that's really the idea for me here, is that I think like what's so cool is that it feels more possible today than it ever did in the past, because, you know, again, like there was limitations. And I think like with the push of trying to standardize formats, I mean, I think that's like, funny enough, it's going to be beneficial to the proprietary, you know, folks as much as it is going to be a benefit to open source, you know, like
it lowers the switching costs across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And I think that's the thing for me that is pretty cool. I mean, and the funny thing is too, when we talk about video production, I mean, I know DaVinci Resolve is a closed source video editor, but they have made efforts to actually run on Linux, which I have used it. I wasn't like super able to figure out how to use Kdenlive initially when I was messing with it, but like I did find that DaVinci Resolve, like it had, you know, a lot of documentation and that sort of thing that was really helpful. But like, I do think that there's going to come a point too where like the browser has started to become the big equalizer. And I even included in the show notes a few tools that I use inside the browser to do content creation related things, like which are just running inside of a browser. So I think that's like the other fascinating thing too, is the fact that like tools are starting to evolve to the point where workloads can actually be done inside the browser.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have dedicated tools that you can install as well. And it's, you know, becoming easier and easier than ever to start doing this stuff.
Yeah, 100%. You know, as a person, you know, I've had an interesting path because I started in the open source world. I've taken a little bit of a detour to go work for a company where I have absolutely no say in the technology that we use. I have no say in the software that we use. And what I can tell you is the studio sitting behind me, all powered by Linux, there's never been a Mac or a Windows box in there, runs significantly better than any proprietary studio I've ever used, ever. Windows is not great for reliability. It tends to crash. Apple doesn't have that problem, but there are a myriad of others, namely by way of updates and keeping software in sync with versions, because Mac has a specific train they want you to be on. And if your software vendor is on the same train, everything works until it doesn't. The second those two get out of sync, it is a disaster, and it's a disaster that you are powerless to fix. And so,
and Macs are also way more opinionated about what capabilities you're able to use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the other thing is they roll out what they believe is security software that works well for the average person. So just a recent example, it broke NDI capture. The way that they fixed their screen recording and wanted permissions and all the things broke NDI capture. And so a way that video was leaving a Mac all of a sudden couldn't leave a Mac. Anyway, stuff like that. is just non-existent on Linux. If it works once, it'll work there. The other thing that I think is going to be the game changer in Linux, and I feel like Noel, with your day job, this will resonate with you. It's reproducible, right? And so we've started building little broadcast boxes. It's underneath the hood. It is Linux with OBS on top of it, but you wouldn't know that because what you see when you plug a display in is just the multi-output of OBS. What you interact with is just a little Stream Deck with buttons on it. And for all intents and purposes, it's an appliance. But you know how that's going? That's all being done with Ansible. And so the nice thing about that is we can tell clients, hey, plug this little USB stick in. It's going to ask you for a code. You put in your station's call letters or whatever the identifier is, goes out to GitLab, downloads all the OBS assets, sets everything up in the background, pulls all the OBS assets in, installs the Blackmagic driver, configures all the scenes, puts all the assets into the scenes, reconnects all the sources. A human being never has to touch it. And yet somebody with no experience other than just, I want to turn this box into a broadcast appliance can do so, and it's all open source. I think we're going to win the battle in the end, gentlemen.
That runs on Fedora, right? Right?
How's this for an answer? Ansible does run on Fedora, and so with the appropriate.
Oh man, I am so disappointed.
with the appropriate lines in the playbook, yes, it will work on Fedora just fine.
Oh.
I'm clever.
We always got to give Noah a little bit of a hard time on the Fedora podcast.
We'll get him someday. He'll finally switch over.
Listen, I have been a Fedora user since before it was Fedora Core, back when it was all one. Like, I've been using it for a long time. It's just the thing that I run into, and maybe this podcast will cause me to change this view, but the thing that I've run into is when somebody goes out to Google to say, I need this thing or I need to fix this thing, what results are going to show up at the very top of their bar?
Yeah.
And that's what I try to skate towards, not from my personal preference. Honestly, it's trying to remove my own preference and lower the bar of friction for the end user is really what that's motivated from, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah,
that's understandable. I mean, yeah, I think that's definitely something that is a goal of mine too, is the fact that seeing Fedora in the search results at a higher rate than we normally do in regards to, just using it for day-to-day stuff. I mean, I think that would be hugely beneficial because, yeah, at the end of the day, like, no hate to Ubuntu by any means. I like the folks, that I've run into that have worked on that project. But yeah, for me, it's just kind of been one of those things where, yeah, it would be cool to see Fedora higher up in those results.
So the flip side I have for this is like it's mostly a be the change you want to be to see that happen, right? Like as you're doing stuff and you're putting it out, if you take the opportunity to write stuff up and you put it in there, it will bubble up, and it does happen. Like I have over the past 10 years made it absolutely no secret that I do everything on Fedora, and I've written stuff up, I've done presentations, podcasts, the whole works, and that has led to a positive. I'm not the only person, obviously, but like me and other people who have done that has led to a positive change in which our usage and our talking about it and our advocacy makes that ship turn. It makes stuff happen, and at the same time, like it is up to us as the people who know the stuff to be able to make that happen, right? Like, so, if we want to have, people more recognition for Fedora and content creation type stuff, we just got to do it. Roll up our sleeves and make it happen. Like, Fedora Sahi Remix was really one of the bigger splashes when it comes to the Fedora Linux distribution to a broader audience.
Yeah.
Because it is the platform that you can do anything Linux based on an Apple Silicon Mac. And we have spent a lot of time and energy building that up and building that out. And it has paid off because that is also fed back into Fedora. Like with Fedora 41 and 42, we put in features that originally came from Fedora Sahi Remix back into Fedora Linux. And this has made in my opinion, it's made Fedora Linux better. It's also driven more people into the Fedora ecosystem and community.
I would agree.
So, And this is the same approach I take for like when I engage with other stakeholders who are like, I want to have a Linux-based product. I want to have a Linux-based project. I want to do things like this. What should I do? And I say, unless you have a really, really, really good reason to choose something else, Fedora is pretty much the point to go for because of that tight integration point, the easy interactions with the community and the maintainers and the developers, and being able to move at a pace that the software itself can be integrated, which sometimes that's, there are people who look at this from a negative light and saying, oh, this is moving too fast. Everything's changing and breaking like every 6 months or whatever. But here's the flip side of this. When you're taking this incrementally and you're going through it piece by piece, you get to be part of the evolution and you get to influence the direction in a way that benefits you. Couple of jobs ago, I was doing this on behalf of the company I was working for, and I was involved in Fedora, and I made packaging changes. I did a lot of work in there, and that work, trickled down into Red Hat Enterprise Linux through CentOS Stream and all this other stuff, and that allowed my employers, customers, to benefit from the work we did to make our lives easier, to make their lives easier. And it fed back in a virtuous cycle that led pretty much everyone to increasingly be happy with how things were working out in that ecosystem. So these are the kinds of things that you can do when you take advantage of all of these fancy points. Like if there's a specific reason that you need to be like, for example, you have some kind of high security certification requirements, then you need to have Red Hat Enterprise Linux or Alma Linux or whatever. And those can, or it has to sit around and not be touched for like forever in a day. That's those kinds of things. But then you still benefit from doing your development in the Fedora space and integrating it there, and then producing an offshoot that is based on the long-term Fedora derivatives, either Alma Linux or CentOS Stream or Red Hat Enterprise Linux or so on and so on and so on, because then you are in this pipeline and you are able to see every change and all your influence, basically rippling out through there and building yourself a sustainability model for supporting your product for the long haul based on whatever gradients you need to make.
Yep. Yeah, and I think be the change you want to see in the world is definitely it's one that I've been thinking about a lot too, in how can we make Fedora be, a bit more like the thing that when you think about Linux, you think about Fedora. I wanted to leave us with one last question before we wrap up here. How can folks help out, either technically or non-technically, in being able to help with getting content creation to be, or the tooling around it, or just the general process around it better? Like how can folks really pitch in and help out? What are your thoughts on that, Neil?
Just do it and write it down. I mean, honestly, no, like it sounds trite, but like if you go scour the internet, there isn't a lot of that. Like what Noah and you guys are doing for the Fedora podcast is gonna probably be one of those kinds of things. Like there aren't that many guides out there. There's not that much information out there on how to do full service production on Linux. And especially not with any distribution, not just Fedora, just anywhere. Right. And so you start putting that stuff together, you start writing it up, you start making it easy for people to replicate it. Then you start seeing more people do it, and more permutations, more evolutions, and that sort of thing. That's I think the easiest thing most people can do is just try it and start doing it and start talking about it. If you're more technically capable, then, start pitching into the applications, the open source applications that are analogs to the things you were previously familiar with, or the ones that people have told you that these are the kinds of things you might want to look at, and start seeing whether you have any skills to help advance them in some way. Like if you're real good at colorimetry and color science, then dig into those aspects, because those are really weak in the Linux space, not because there is no technical coders or whatever, but there aren't enough color scientists to help out to get this stuff done. Software engineering is always an adjunct discipline. It is not a discipline in which you are the expert in how something is made. You have to rely on another expert of another field to implement something correctly. So if you're a color scientist or you're an artist or you're any of these things, go talk to the people that make software for your space in the open source world and see how you can help work with them to improve things over the long haul. It may not be immediate. It may not have any results in the short term, but it will eventually.
I love it.
Awesome.
Neil, thanks for joining us. We'll get you back in the program soon.
Always happy to.
Hey, I like Noah said, I really appreciate all of us being able to gather together and talk about this stuff. This has been a really great episode, and yeah, I'm just really appreciative of everybody here.
Nailed it. Noel, do you want source recordings for this?
I can probably just yank down the YouTube and probably just cut what I need to cut.
If you notice,
you might want source recordings for this one.
I have them if you need them. The thing that I would check, because it's the only thing I didn't double check, is I would check audio levels. I mostly went off of, hey, the internet says it sounds good, and then we just kind of started, and I didn't really think, so I didn't meter.
Yeah.
So, but I have a source recording of the audio too. So if it's clipped or it's low or whatever, let me know. I will get you sources.
Yeah, if I'll watch the YouTube, and if there's something up with the audio or anything like that, then I'll probably want the source recordings to fix things. But I mean, overall, I think it should be fine. So we'll see what happens.
Copy that.
I mean, you would probably want it to do the video part of it, right? Because like the video looks kind of weird.
I've got
giant Noel text.
I've got both. Whatever you want, I'll happily send it to you. I don't want to keep you past 4:30 because I know you got kids and all the things. But
no, it's a meeting. But I get you.
Oof.
So
a meeting at 4:30.
A meeting with my boss.
Guess who's leaving work late today?
It's mountain time.
Yeah.
Nah, it's all good. All right, Take it easy, everybody.
See you guys.
Take care.
Yep. Bye.